You're listening to Planxty, a podcast exploring the rich tapestry of Irish dance and the community who loves it. Hosted by Julia Topper, ethnomusicologist, Irish dancer, music educator, and writer, and Christo Sween, a 20-year Irish dance dad, live camera director for feis TV, and operations manager at the Celtic Junction Arts Centre. Over the weekend, the Celtic Junction was a sponsor of an event in town called Rock the Cradle, which is sponsored by one of the local public radio stations. And it's a great event for kids to come and listen to kid-friendly rock music. It happens at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts, and we had a table outside where we have a variety of instruments and dance shoes and a shillelagh and a hurling stick and all kinds of stuff, and a small red plastic accordion.
Oh.
And so I thought of your daughter, and I thought of Brian O'Sullivan back in the day. And I ended up, because we want kids to interact with it, but we don't want them to pull it off the table.
Sure, yeah.
So I ended up standing at that corner of the table teaching accordion.
Love it.
Like 101 level accordion to these little kids, where to put the left hand and how the left hand operates the bellows and where the fingers go on the, because a little piano accordion. And they did. The kids couldn't get enough of it. And then one kid came up and he must be a piano student, because then once he figured out how it worked and how he'd make the notes play, he played a song.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, he played a little Christmas tune that he knew. Yeah.
Oh,
So
nice. That's very cool.
Really cool. So it's fun
Sylvia
to
would
see,
love that.
these little kids that just are getting exposed to this kind of stuff is really,
Oh, yeah.
it's really heartwarming to see.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I've thought about bringing, I think I've said before on the podcast, I teach at my daughter's, it's pre-K, but it's in through kindergarten daycare, and I teach the 2s and up through kindergarten. And, I try to at least once a month bring in a different instrument to pass around, because it, teaches them about the instrument, but it's also about, delayed gratification, because the kids have to wait quietly while their friends play the instrument, and they have to sit, and then we pass it around. They actually do surprisingly well. The 2-year-olds actually do better than the kindergartners, I think, funny enough. But I haven't brought in the accordion because it's a little bit more delicate. But I'm wondering if I should get a second toy accordion for them to be able to pass around and play with, because it really is such an unusual instrument, and there's so much that they can do with it.
It's really, and it's fascinating and interactive and compelling on so many different levels. When I was having the kids hold down the keys on the left hand, you can feel it shake. It vibrates differently when those low notes are coming out. And I'm like, can you feel that? And they're like, oh yeah, it's really cool. It was this very sensory experience.
Oh,
for them.
yeah.
So it was cool, and it was super fun for all
so
of us
fun.
there. So yeah, it was great.
That's great. Well, we're back with part 2 with Francis, and we're going to talk a lot about music more in this, but we're going to get a little bit more specific to some of Francis's compositions. I had a teacher. He was one of the first teachers that I learned from as an adult, and I ended up, being his teaching assistant, many years later. And he always said in the beginner classes that before we learn to dance, you have to learn how to listen. So this is going to be a good listening episode, I think, with some good examples. Because that was the first thing. You don't learn how to dance first. You sit in a circle and you learn how to count to 8. And then you take away some of the claps and you figure out where to clap. He tells them, okay, clap on 7. Okay, now clap on 3. Now clap on, and getting them that tuned in. So we have some good some samples for the listeners today, and they're going to put their listening ears on.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, it's very, very informative, compelling, and educational. That's what we're aiming for. So, yep, good stuff. All right, well, let's hit it.
So this is a good time to segue, I think, into talking about the Vanishing Lake. I think this is going to be probably one of your, musical legacies that you're going to leave the Irish dance world is the Vanishing Lake. And so probably a lot of people who are listening didn't realize that you were the composer for this. I was wondering if you could tell the story about, the competition that the CLRG had, and also your process for how you, decided to make this piece.
Yeah, so this was the winner of the Murray Foundation Creativity in Irish kind of dance composition award. I think in 2011, if not mistaken. So the call was basically to all kind of fresh musicians or anybody who was interested to compose a new set dance where we would update the canon of official approved set dances. I suppose it was natural for me to think, of course, I would do that because I had already composed a lot of set dances which made it into the Irish dance canon of the Festival Dance Teachers Association. So it was kind of thought, yeah, it would be great to do that. I'd enjoy doing it. It's something I do anyway, So I actually put 2 entries into the competition. I don't know if you're aware. The one was the Vanishing Lake, and the other one was called the Bard's Journey, which is also a jig set dance. It was funny, when I recorded them, I sent them to my co-dance teachers, Mairead and Orla Ivrian. And I said, I just came up with these 2 pieces, but I can't decide. Will I just put one in? Will I put both one in? I like this one better. And it was actually the Bard's Journey, not the Vanishing Lake. And they were like, yeah, I can see how you love that one, but I think the other one, is going to be really appealing. And I said, I'll throw them both in and see what happens, So I didn't know who else was going in, and I just thought, sure, why not? And the award ceremony and where it was announced was actually at the University of Limerick, where I think I was doing my master's, or I was working at the time, certainly, or I just started my PhD, actually. So I didn't know, who was going to win or whatever. It was judged by Micheál Sullivan, who's the professor of music, who was the professor of music, and who had taught me a number of master classes, and Sylvan Kelly, who was a very renowned and established and well-respected Irish dance teacher and choreographer, and Richard Griffin, who is the same, probably a generation before, but very well-respected in terms of being a solo Ceilidh figure teacher, down through the decades. And it was judged or adjudicated blind, if you like. They had all the recordings, but they didn't have any of the names and that kind of thing. On the night, all the tunes were played live by an ensemble from the Irish World Academy at UL, so an ensemble of students. And that was actually surreal because obviously I'd recorded my tunes in my style on the kind of feis machine, but to hear them then come to life with, probably around 8 musicians. I mean, I was getting kind of shivers down my back thinking, God, that's actually kind of nice, when they were playing it. And my parents came with me and they were like sweating, and like, were you happy with that? And it sounded amazing, the things that parents do, all the reassuring things, and so it was a really amazing night. Then it was announced that it was the winner, and it was the Vanishing Lake, and I suppose important for me, and which had gone hand in hand with the composition, was, I mean, some of it was, I'm just going to write a nice tune, but the other things I was thinking about was, what are the jig sets that people are doing at the minute? Well, they're doing Drunken Gauger, they're doing Blackthorn Stick, they're doing 3C Captains, they're all really happy clappy, major keys, and I thought, well, why don't we have something minor, because in the hornpipe realm, we have King of the Fairies and Ramblin' Rake and all these kind of, so I thought, well, I'll put something in a minor key, and with the set dances that I had composed for the Festival Dance Teachers Association, they were all after kind of myths and legends and local stories and Irish stories in folklore. And so I did the same for the Vanishing Lake, which is a location which is only maybe 50 minutes from where I live at home in County Antrim, and it's this literally lake that vanishes. It's up in the hills, and just depending on the day you go, there could be a lake there and there may not be. You probably know a little bit about it. And there's a story goes about it that there was a road that went through the lake. But you could only go, the road was only passable when the lake wasn't there, when the water had drained. But if the rain came up, then the lake was there, so you couldn't physically get through it, Now we have a road that goes over it. But and there's a story about, an army battalion in a coach and soldiers and a general who were going for a train, and they were on the way up to the Vanishing Lake, and, they thought they had the all clear. But while they were going through the Vanishing Lake, the lake reappeared. and they were drowned, and it talks about the ghosts of this carriage of the general, and so kind of haunting the Vanishing Lake sense, and I thought, this is a really good story. It goes with the music. It's got the minor music. It's got that. I think it kind of tells the story of it somewhat. And so, I mean, composition for me, I guess, in that sense, is very holistic in terms of you've got the music, which speaks to the story, which then speaks maybe to how it's interpreted as a dance. And I know a few years ago, I think it was the Morgan School did a Vanishing Lake dance drama as well, and retold that story then through another medium of dance. So. So that's kind of got a bit lost there when I was explaining that, but that's kind of really where it come from. And then it was added to the official list. Following from that, they had a competition at the All Ireland one year. I don't know if you were around then, where it was just a Vanishing Lake dance competition. So the top 5 from the male and female categories, I think maybe from under 18 up from the year before at the World, were invited then to showcase their choreography to the Vanishing Lake. And so that was showcased, and then they had a different panel of judges for that, and first, second, and third, and that. And that was like a huge launch pad for it, because that was basically getting the best teachers, the best dancers, with this new music and, all their different ways of interpreting it. And it was just hugely rich and kind of, I guess, rewarding as a dancer and musician to see that kind of brought to life and embraced by the dance community. Because, I mean, the biggest success really of being a composer is, do people play your music? Do they like your music? Does it persist through time? I mean, to think we've got these tunes from hundreds of years ago that people still, I love that tune, and you're thinking that tune's hundreds of years old. And to think that the Vanishing Lake is something that could stay around that long. I mean, it's lasted 15 years, so we get another 15.
And still wildly popular, right? You just, I mean, that's one that everybody goes towards. I know that's honestly like one of my favorite ones to play on the piano, and I'm just feeling like sitting and just noodling with something. Like, I love just sitting and playing that because it lends itself to that storytelling. I think, like you were saying, you've crafted it in such a way, I think, that people can really take it and make it their own. And I think that kind of relates back to what we were saying about tradition in music, right? And how everything does take on a life of its own, and these new interpretations and new identities, I think, that people begin to associate with that music, which I think leads us pretty well into what we want to do here. Do we want to do...
Before we go there, though, I have one other question. So I'm just curious about, do you recall the names of any of the dancers that were in that competition then the following year, doing their take on it?
Yeah, I mean, you had like Cathal Keaney and Claire of Greeny and that ilk, of all those amazing dancers at the time. I think they were the top 2. And it was great because you had like males interpreting it, you had females interpreting it, you had geographical areas, you had Ireland, you had the UK, you had America. Which was really fabulous to see the different ways that they were taking this music and making it their own and interpreting it in new ways.
That's very cool.
And
do you know if there's any video recordings of that?
I think there is, yeah. I'm not sure who has it, but there definitely is a video recording of it.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I suppose
that would make a good paper. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's true.
We can make a good paper out of that.
Yeah. And I suppose the analog of that, to as well as then how other musicians made their own of the tune as well. Because obviously I recorded it at the start. It was the composer, and myself and Sean recorded it at the start, Sean O'Brien, who you'll know well. And how I interpreted it originally, I suppose, and then how others interpreted it, but also how our interpretation of those tunes, like all the other tunes, has grown and developed, and we're telling a different story with it each time we play. And I think that, as well as the choreography, the kind of choreography of the arrangement, if you like, is also something that the brilliant musicians that we have on the scene bring a freshness to every time they kind of perform it.
Amazing. I happened to be with Cormac, and Sean was in town here in Minnesota when the news came down that it was the Vanishing Lake that was selected. So it was kind of cool. I had never met you before, and it's not that long ago, but it's long enough ago that, as just a dance dad, I'm just like, well, I have really no idea what the significance of this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, the story of it is super cool to hear. So thanks for sharing that.
Well, we've got some recordings to share. Like I was saying, now you've put this thing out into the world, and people have their own stories and their own associations with it. And so I was thinking about my associations with it. And, this is something we talked at the Worlds, this recent Worlds, and I was telling you a story to see if you remembered this, but I'm going to share it with our listeners now. So I was doing my field work, and people who've listened to this know the story a little bit, and I was panicked because I was supposed to write this music chapter, and I was defending in 2 months, and I had not written my music chapter. So I was there and panicked. And, Sean O'Brien kind of got me in and got me interviews with all of you guys. And I did quite a bit of sitting with the two of you. And I remember the first time sitting with you, and you turned to me and you went, I'm an ethnomusicologist. And I was like, oh no, imposter syndrome. I have to prove to this man that I know what I'm talking about. And you were so generous and so nice. But we were sitting and, you were doing your set dances, and I had my mic, and I was like, I definitely want to get, Francis Ward playing The Vanishing Lake. And you turned to me and you went, are you going to transcribe this? And I went, I don't know. And you were like, I'm going to make it really hard to transcribe. And I was like, oh no. And you did. And so we actually have 2 recordings that we're going to share. So this is from my field work at the 2017 Nationals. So the first one is of you and Sean playing together. And this, I would say, is kind of, obviously you're playing this differently every time, but this is, I would say, kind of a more like normal, like how you would typically play it for a competition. So that was the first one. And then, I must have gotten 10 recordings, I think, of each of these dances. So I was so afraid of like missing the one that I wanted. So this next recording is the one after you turned to me and said you were going to jazz it up a little bit for me.
Sorry.
So I love that recording. But my question for you is, how dare you?
I would love to see the transcription.
Oh, I didn't transcribe it. Oh, okay. Absolutely not. No, I went home. I actually ended up transcribing. It was I did a Countess Kathleen that you guys had played, but I did actually go into my dissertation and look today because I couldn't remember what I did, and I just put Francis Ward keyboard not pictured because I couldn't, like, I was so panicked and I was afraid of getting it wrong. But I love, like, that is one of my favorite recordings that I've ever gotten in the field, I think, because you both just got so into it. You know, and I mean, you guys always give high quality performances no matter what, but there was a drama to that one that really just stuck with me. And I actually use that when I do like my world music lectures. I talk about feis music as a subgenre of Irish music, and I actually use that as a recording and talk about that. So thank you for giving me a wonderful example to share with my students.
No problem. Yeah, I remember the year you did that. I mean, and yeah, Sean, I mean, you know, Sean is just great. I mean, we've played together over 20 years now, I think, at these competitions, and we have a great understanding of each other, and I think where we go, and you know, we follow each other and that kind of thing. So it takes a pair really to pull that off. But yeah, it's when I hear those things, it's just like, oh, that's and that and that and that. And sometimes from years ago, I think that's nice. And why don't I do that more? And you hear all the different bits and pieces that you throw in that, it's weird to listen to.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. Well, and I remember one of the things that you talked to me about when we were doing our interview for my dissertation is talking about the process of reoralization in feis music, or well, just in music in general, in Irish music, right? This process of kind of reinterpretation and stylization and things like that. And I can definitely hear that in your accompaniment playing for these competitions, right? Like just everything you were doing in the background there, if people go back and listen to it again, the way you were doubling the melody at some points, and you got some glissandos in there, you were really putting all these different touches on it. And I've heard you do all those different things in other places, but not when you really jam-packed it all into one set dance, which was great. Well, and now we have another, we're talking about reinterpretations, reoralization, how these pieces take on kind of their own life and own identity. Christo, do you want to set up this particular clip?
Sure. I didn't understand or expect that this would be sort of the Sean O'Brien show
right, yeah.
as well, but I should have assumed just based on how much you guys play together. So in the show that Cormac and Natalie produce here with the dance school called Kicking It Irish, there is a period in the show where Sean does a little introduction where he talks about Irish dance and competition and kind of sets the, sort of frames up where all these performers are, sort of how they've come up through these competitions. And he talks about set dances, and then he mentions that there's this one that was composed by a friend, and the way more often than not, Sean will say, and it is what it says on the tin. It's a lake that disappears and comes back. But what we do in the show, what Sean and Cormac have come up with, is that they started out as an air. This is a beautiful slow air that Cormac starts out on box, and Sean joins in on keys, and then it ramps up into a duel of two of our dancers on the stage as part of the show. So it gets up to tempo and does what it's supposed to. And claim to fame a little bit the show. The phrase from the whose name escapes me now, but the guy who came up with whimsical skedaddling.
Mr. Crooks, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Crooks called it the skedaddle battle. When
forgot about that.
Shared that, yeah. So that was a brush with greatness. Not quite as great as the Vanishing Lake itself, but still. So anyway, that's enough of that. Here is, and it's just the beginning until it ramps into that competition part. But here it is.
love to get your reaction to hearing that.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, when you slow it down like that, you have so much more room for the dynamics changes and the crescendos and decrescendos. And I mean, when I think I told you earlier on with the festival set downs that I composed, like they're performed at speed 50. I mean, we think 76 is slow. They're like speed 50, So there's a lot of room for, that kind of interpretation. But I never thought of playing Vanishing Lake that slow, but it's lovely. I mean, when you've got the musicianship, you could take Twinkle Twinkle and make it sound gorgeous, but it was really lovely what they did there, and it's amazing actually the harmony, like how it changes the phrasing, putting a different chord in makes it sound like, oh, well, that's an end point and then we're restarting. So, it's lovely. I mean, how you can experiment with that to change it's obviously a fixed tune, but like where you put those emphasis kind of changes the character of the tune completely. So it's lovely to hear it.
It's sort of a delight in each performance, because none of us know exactly what Sean's introductory chord is going to be. Like it's never the same.
I was thinking that, yeah. When I heard the first chord, I thought, yeah, it's Sean.
It's Sean doing his thing, and yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but everyone takes particular delight in whatever creativity Sean's got for that first part. It's fun to hear. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was lovely. I think I probably should have. I could have sent you some of the other set dances. Might have been interested to explore them, but
that would be great.
They're different, but I can send them on again if you want to.
We can do a follow-up episode later.
I was thinking we totally should.
Set dances with Dr. Francis Ward. Let's do it.
And I'm particularly eager to layer them in with sort of the epic stories that you were talking about too, where they come from, and that's a fascinating story to tell as well. So it'd be fun to maybe that's a multimedia one that we put together.
Yeah,
we'll have to see what we can come up with. So
I was saying to Christo earlier, one of my favorite podcasts, I don't know if you've heard it, it's Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, and it's just very funny. But he recently did an episode with the musician Charlie Puth, and they had him plugged into the keyboard during the podcast episode, and this man was just accompanying the podcast episode. And I was like, we need to have one of our musicians do that. We just need to plug someone in and they can just sit and interpret the conversation and what's going on. I think that'd be fabulous. I actually wanted to talk a little bit more about, you said this really interesting article, kind of bring this a little bit back to ethnomusicology and this kind of deep listening. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background on it for folks. You co-published with a woman who's really well known she's an ethnomusicologist in the music education sphere. Her name's Patricia Campbell. And so this article uses your Planxty Ar Sarsfield from this Wild Geese Suite. And it's an example of how K through 12 music educators can approach teaching Irish traditional music using a method called World Music Pedagogy, WMP for short. And so for folks, this is a pedagogical process that helps people develop understanding of music from cultures different than their own. And it involves a lot of this kind of deep listening and then talking through. And the article is great because, it goes through and talks about different ways to pose these questions to kids of different ages and at different levels. So reading that, I was really curious about how, kind of studying this particular music practice maybe informs your own listening as a feis musician or perhaps as an Irish dance teacher or an adjudicator. In what ways can we maybe take this WMP, this World Music Pedagogy, and bring it into the studio and kind of help our own students listen to the music that they dance to?
It's a great question. I suppose in dance class, in a competitive dance class, certainly the pace is so intense that it's you're very much focused on the teaching of steps, polishing, and technique, and that kind of thing, and the execution and preparation. That deeply listening to music, I often wonder, even myself, because kids will ask you for certain tunes maybe when they're playing, and a lot of the time, I think children, when they go on the stage, they just zone out and they hear the beat, and they're not even that. You could come off and they'd say, "Oh, thanks for that tune," and you might say, "Oh my God, I actually forgot to play it." But they didn't realize because they're just so focused on what they're doing. So the idea of deep listening, I think is probably something more for the music ed classroom. Certainly with the set dances, I try to get them to kind of listen and think about the music, and obviously timing is very important, but not also just timing, because timing is the basic thing that they're going to interpret, but also the rhythm and the dynamics. I mean, it's something probably as a school that we would really emphasize, even as a lot of the time, the steps of the children who are winning world championships maybe are not that complicated. They're super well executed, and maybe the musicality and the density and the complexity of the rhythm isn't the same as it maybe as common, let's say, as it was 10 or 15 years ago. But it's something that we would still be passionate about in terms of instilling that in our children, is the ability to do that and to bring them to their capacity in terms of how they do that. I think the best dancers that we've ever had have always had that musicality, and people would have said that, God, that was so musical, or, the way they danced it. Actually, both kids who I had, a boy and a girl who won the World Championships, danced the Vanishing Lake, actually. So, and different versions of it, So I think that musicality is definitely important, and to instill that into dancers as a part of, maybe that is deep listening in a way. It's definitely deep interpretation of how that rules with the music. But the World Music Pedagogy, it's a fascinating thing. For me, it kind of combines the two areas I work in, which is ethnomusicology and music education. And I suppose the piece I chose, in terms of the deep listening, it's all what I also wanted to communicate through that article. What was that this is a piece of music, again, that is composed with a story. It's to represent Planxty Sarsfield, who was the leading general of this Jacobite army who were exiled to France. And it talks about, and if you've listened to the introduction to it, is a poetry in Irish and English, which speaks about the kind of defeat and that kind of the mourning and the disappointment, but then also the hope of the new start when these 16,000 soldiers and their families went to France, and the new start and the kind of hope and the resilience. So it moves from that kind of desperation and defeat towards kind of that fresh start. And so through the music, it moves kind of from, that kind of through those two topics. And it allows a window into Irish culture, into Irish history, into Irish music, and for us to think about music in a much more integrated way. I mean, music is the notes, it's the pitch, it's the rhythm, but it's also the interpretation, and it's also the role that music plays in carrying historical memory and kind of in representing the culture. And that's true for all cultures. So World Music Pedagogy gives us license to, yes, listen to the music and really understand and analyze and understand the music and perhaps perform it, but also to understand the richness of it, and also to allow us to kind of transpose our understanding of that story and that context. I mean, when we look at the world now, like, we're not short on conflict. We look at the Middle East, look at Ukraine and Russia. I mean, there's a lot of people being displaced by war, and what does that involve? I mean, that involves a lot of desolation and desperation and tragedy. But we also hope that there's some light and some room for resilience and for starting anew there. So to transpose that experience of the Irish people through the flight of the Wild Geese, and Planxty Sarsfield, who was the commander of this army, who had to agree to this, that yes, we will leave Ireland and start afresh. I think that's the really, that we call that an integrated thinking, where we think about how music can teach us so much more about history and about geography, about people, about communities, time and place, and not just historical instances of these challenges, but also contemporary challenges. These are things that never go away. So the role of music in mediating that. So rather than maybe talking about war and conflict straight away, well, we listen to this piece of music, we explore that, and we encounter it through music, which can be a fun way, an engaging way, and a different way to look at it. So yeah, I mean, the deep listening, probably, I think, about musicality and rhythm and that kind of thing, and the World Music Pedagogy, it's a beautifully rich pedagogy, I think, for K-12 or for all educators to think about.
Yeah, no, that's really great. I think, I laugh about ethnomusicology because, it's a funny word. And, I think sometimes, in all professions, we can take ourselves a little bit too seriously sometimes. But I think that this discipline being able to bring those things, like you said, it's communicating cultural values, it's communicating history, it's communicating personal identity, and having people like you that are doing this work and bringing this into the everyday music classroom, and it's not just Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms that's getting taught. There is so much more to music than we think about just outside of our own little bubble, and doing that with the things that you're bringing in. I think that's absolutely fabulous, and I think a lot of music educators are going to really benefit from that. Very cool stuff.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Thank you.
So in the music that I played previously from Cuimhnigh Irish, Sean spent some time talking about competition. As I said, I wonder if we could just spend a few minutes exploring, what you think. Like, is competition a vital part of this culture? Of this music experience, of this dance experience? Does competition have to be part of it?
It's a great question. Something we revisit frequently as a dance school. I would say probably about 70% of the pupils in our dance school don't do competitions. They just love Irish dance. It's a hobby for them. They maybe go once a week, twice a week. It's friendship, social, cultural, that kind of thing. And the parents and the children are very happy about that. And we're happy with that, and we have a range of teachers in the school who kind of cater for those different interests and different needs. I'm more focused on the competitive class. Do I think it's necessary? I don't think it is necessary. We have lots of social dancing groups around the world, social dance groups who don't compete. So I mean, I don't think it would be in any danger of existing if we didn't have the competitions. Do I think there are positives and negatives to the whole thing? Of course there are then, largely positive because of my own experience. I mean, it's brought the standard to fantastical heights. We've just got amazing performers, and not just performers, but they're artists, they're athletes, they're super fit, can be super artistic, they're super informed about health and well-being, and the range of skills and range of things that they need to engage with nowadays to be at the top of their game is absolutely amazing, and gives them a lot of transferable skills in terms of they know how to be confident, they know how to be healthy, they know how to make friends, they can perform, they know obviously a lot about dance and a good lot about music from their engagement with it. So there are lots of positives in terms of this sphere. Obviously there are a lot of drawbacks in terms of the presentational side of things, and the reputation that goes along with that in terms of the cost, what they are required, to wear, kind of in terms of the expectation. We all know it's not required, but it is required. And from the outside world, that seems crazy, and it is crazy. I think the expenses, like the cost of it, is just crazy. I mean, the lessons, paying for lessons and what teachers kind of make as a living is actually the least profitable, or the least, and that's the most important thing, is that we're the ones passing on the tradition. My colleague often says they'll pay more for their sock glue than they will for a 3-hour class, it's, I suppose it's, we've created that monster, but I think it would be great to get it under control somehow, however we make that happen. But yeah, I think it's amazing. We're pushing everything to new standards, the globalization of it, the opportunities with the shows that have come out of competition culture, and the things that continue to come from that, the degree courses, and people, really being able to make their living from it, and experiencing positives within the competition sphere, but then also using those skills then in the performance arena and touring. And I was lucky myself to dance with Riverdance for a while, and that was an amazing experience as well, to be able to take the skills I'd learned and use them in a new way. And so many of the young dancers, and not so young now, but they're really making they're podcasting, they're inventing, they're creating, they're superstars on Instagram, and what they're doing, they're driven. Their creativity is really being recognized and really being fueled by, I suppose, the media and the technology and how it's being circulated. I think that's amazing. Like, you talk about the skedaddle and all that, the fame that's brought outside, our closed circle is just absolutely amazing. I was actually in the gym the other night, and this guy asked me to help him with something, and I said, "Oh, I think you're new here. I haven't seen you." He said, "Yeah, I'm from Brazil." I said, "Oh, what's your interest in the gym?" And he said, "Oh, I'm actually an aerial, acrobat." And I said, "Oh, great." And I said, I don't perform anymore, but I used to be an Irish dancer." And he said, "An Irish step dancer?" And I said, "Yes." This guy was probably around 30. And he said, "Hold on 1 minute, okay?" And he was on his phone, and I was thinking, what the heck's he looking for, And he was on his 5 minutes. He had scrolled back to 10 years ago, and he showed me a video of him in Brazil performing Irish step dance. He was in a little waistcoat, trousers, doing a kind of man grad, like an intermediate reel. He said, "I used to do it and I loved it, and we performed and we did this and this and this and this and this." And I was like, this world is crazy. It's so small.
Amazing.
In a country
That's
like
so cool.
Brazil, which we don't really associate. I mean, Argentina, yeah, there's connections there and some of the other ones, but Brazil, we don't traditionally associate it with kind of an Irish kind of, an Irish culture. But it was just, I was flabbergasted, And I said, "Oh, right, okay, well, I can show you videos of my kids dancing and maybe some from me years ago." And it was just the weirdest connection to make, And he said, "I loved it." And, we had a really huge school. And again, theirs wasn't driven by competition. Actually, just that we're mentioning it. They did so many performances and, loved it. And so it's amazing, from all those different, and I often wonder, what makes a Brazilian wake up one day and think, "I want to learn Irish dance," But then so many people from diverse backgrounds are driven and excited by Irish culture, and it's kind of really honouring as somebody who's Irish. I really think, God, it's a real privilege for people to think, that's amazing and I love it and I want to learn it.
Yeah.
So, and I don't, when my expression there, they totally belong. It's not like I'm outsidering them, but I just, you sometimes think, God, what drives that?
When you think this is a culture that was almost completely stamped out, right? That was the whole goal of the Gaelic League and then the CLRG was to revitalize this. And I think they were wildly successful, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hugely beyond their imagination, I would say. I mean, the language has had a great revival, but I mean, the dance the proliferation of dance and music is just a spectacular success,
I think it's really interesting, the tension that sometimes exists within Irish dance between competition and not competition. For all the reasons that you listed, that it has done so many amazing things for Irish dance, right? That the level is so high, the athleticism is so high, the artistry. It's led to all of these different shows that have come out of it and things like that. But there is this tension, I think, that sometimes comes from maybe what people see on the surface when they look in, right? I was kind of laughing, thinking, you go on some of these posts and you'll see people commenting, "Oh, Irish dance is so different than it was in my day, and the wigs and the dresses and da 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 da." And I think it's so funny that 99% of the comments are like that, when 99% of the time Irish dancers are sitting in our sweaty gym clothes with the lopsided ponytail and exhausted and red in the face, and it's such a different image, I think, than the rest of the world has. So it leads to this really interesting tension, I think, when we talk about the identity of Irish dance and what is Irish dancing. And I think that being able to recognize that there are so many different sides to it, and now being able to show that through these schools that are starting in Brazil or in Japan or wherever else they're doing it, and they're coming up with their own identity of it and way that people can look at and the way that people see it. I think it's very fascinating. And maybe it's different. I can't really think of it. I mean, there are a lot of folk dances where people have competitions, but I'm thinking something like piano competitions. That's a very different world, right? There isn't necessarily this that same sort of tension where does what we have, is there a validity to this if we're not doing competitions? Is it only valid outside of competitions? I think we spend a lot of time going through this over and over again, but it's such a part of the tradition now that it seems like it's probably always going to come back and be with us for a very long time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you point to something. I think we all have to take responsibility for the image that we put out there in terms of what Irish dance is. I mean, as a school on our Instagram, we're always conscious to, feature the different strands of our community, whether it's competitive or non-competitive. Because getting that, photo of the girl in the wig and the costume and just, it's one part, but it's probably like 5% of, who reaches the world championships, like very few. It's an elite, that's an elite sport. But the participatory kind of grassroots, I think needs to be celebrated as well. And that's something I think the Commission, I've tried to pull back in the last few years, is thinking about the transmission and passing on of the tradition as the fundamental that holds it all together, and celebrating that and promoting that. And I think some of those shows, the Irish dance documentaries have done a great job of doing that, because they do show a lot of the blood, sweat and hard work that goes on behind the training, and it shows the dedication, the athleticism, the mental toughness, the resilience, the commitment of the teachers, the parents, the children, the drive. And, wow, a 10-year-old can do that, or an 11-year-old can do that. And it does show it off to its best, instead of that one end point of this is what a world champion in Irish dance wears, or, it's so reductive in a way. And I think we can take responsibility for that and show it off in the range of kind of performance and non-performance contexts, which they take part in. So I think taking the power back there and changing the narrative, definitely we can have a role in that,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that we are responsible for, the images that we put out there. And with being able to share things so readily, whether it's pictures or videos or whatnot, it's so easy to snap those pictures and put them out, and whether we're thinking about what that content is or not. I do think taking some responsibility for the image that we're putting out is pretty important.
I agree. That's a great sentiment. I agree. And Frances, I think that was a great way to maybe draw this conversation to a close. It is on us, to do that, to not be reductive, to not feed into that, sort of reductive nature. Because I think that's the easy route when we're all on social media and our screens all the time, to focus on, really the richness and diversity of the community and the people who love it. That's why we're doing the podcast. So thanks for putting a button on it in such a nice way, and for taking the time to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Planxty Podcast. Our technical producer is Christo Sween. Our managing producer is Julia Topper. Theme music composed and performed by Sean O'Brien. New episodes drop on the 17th of every month.